Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. So, where are you watching from and what are you doing right now? I hope you enjoy hearing this story. Now, take a deep breath, get comfortable, and let's drift into a peaceful slumber together. This time I will tell you about the Legend of Simba. Let's get started. The golden sun rose gently over the vast African savanna, painting the sky in warm hues of amber and gold. The air was crisp, carrying the soft whispers of the morning breeze as it rustled through the tall grass. Birds greeted the new day with delicate melodies, and the distant roar of a lion echoed across the Pride lands, a sound that signified strength, unity, and the balance of life. Nestled within the heart of the kingdom, atop the mighty Pride Rock, a momentous event was unfolding. Queen Sarabi, with eyes full of warmth and wisdom, lay quietly in the cool shadows of the royal den. In her embrace rested a tiny cub, his golden fur barely ruffled as he took his first slow breaths in this vast and magnificent world. His paws, small and delicate, twitched slightly as he stirred, unaware of the destiny that awaited him. This was Simba, the heir to the throne, the future ruler of the Pride lands. News of his birth spread swiftly across the kingdom, carried by the winds and whispered through the trees. The elephants lifted their great trunks to the sky in celebration, while the zebras pranced through the grasslands with a joyous rhythm. The gazelles, always watchful and alert, paused from their grazing, sensing the significance of the day. Even the distant giraffes, their long necks stretching toward the heavens, stood still in reverence. Far away, beneath the shade of an ancient baobab tree, an old mandrill sat in quiet meditation. Rafiki, the wise shaman of the Pride lands, had known this day would come. He had felt it in the shifting winds, in the gentle rustling of the leaves, and in the whispers of the ancestors. With a steady breath, he opened his wise old eyes, a knowing smile playing on his lips. It was time. With his staff in hand, adorned with sacred gourds and charms, Rafiki made his way toward Pride Rock. As he approached, the lionesses of the Pride stood respectfully, their eyes filled with anticipation. They had witnessed the birth of a future king before, but each time it was as if the earth itself paused in honor of the new life that would shape its future. At the entrance of the den, King Mufasa stood tall, his golden mane glowing under the morning sun. His deep, amber eyes met Rafiki's, and for a moment, no words were needed. They had known each other for many seasons, and in that silence, an unspoken understanding passed between them. Inside the den, Sarabi lifted her head, her expression calm and serene. She nudged Simba gently toward Rafiki, trusting him with the ancient blessing that had been passed down through generations. The old mandrill reached out, his wrinkled fingers brushing over the tiny cub's fur. He studied Simba carefully, observing the soft rise and fall of his breath, the delicate twitch of his ears. Then, with a knowing nod, he smiled. "This one," Rafiki whispered, "is destined for greatness." Carefully, he scooped Simba into his arms and stepped out into the bright morning light. The gathered animals below grew silent, their eyes wide with awe and expectation. Even the wind seemed to still as Rafiki made his way to the very edge of Pride Rock, where the entire kingdom stretched out before them. With slow, deliberate movements, he dipped his fingers into a sacred mixture of fruit and earth, tracing a gentle mark upon Simba's forehead. It was a blessing of strength, wisdom, and harmony, the qualities that every true king must possess. Then, With a deep breath, he lifted the cub high into the air. A hush fell over the land. Then, as if in perfect unison, the animals bowed. The elephants lowered their massive heads, the zebras bent their legs, and the antelopes knelt in quiet respect. Even the distant mountains seemed to stand a little taller, as if acknowledging the momentous occasion. Above them, the sky parted ever so slightly, and a beam of golden light bathed Simba in its glow. It was as if the ancestors themselves had bestowed their blessing upon the young cub, affirming his place in the great circle of life. Then, a sound unlike any other filled the air, the triumphant call of the wild. A roar, a song, a celebration of life itself. The Pride Lands echoed with the voices of its creatures, welcoming their future king with reverence and joy. As the echoes of the celebration faded into the horizon, Rafiki gently lowered Simba and returned him to Sarabi. The queen licked her cub's forehead, a silent promise that she would protect and nurture him with all the love in her heart. Mufasa watched them with deep emotion, his heart swelling with pride. But he also knew that the road ahead would not be easy. A king's path was filled with challenges, lessons, and responsibilities. Simba was still just a cub, innocent and unaware of the weight his name would carry. But in time, he would learn. Mufasa turned his gaze toward the vast savanna, feeling the warmth of the sun on his mane and the steady rhythm of life flowing all around him. With a deep breath, he whispered a silent vow to the ancestors. "I will guide him well." Yet, not all eyes that watched were filled with joy. In the distant shadows, hidden among the jagged rocks, a pair of piercing green eyes glowed with quiet calculation. Scar, Mufasa's younger brother, had seen everything. He had watched as Simba was lifted into the light, as the kingdom had bowed in devotion. He had listened to the cheers of the animals and felt the weight of what it all meant. For years, Scar had lived in the shadow of his older brother, always second, always overlooked. But with the birth of this cub, his place in the line of succession had been pushed even further away. His sleek black mane rustled in the evening breeze as he exhaled slowly, a faint smirk playing on his lips. The circle of life, he murmured to himself, can be unpredictable. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, the Pride Lands slowly settled into the rhythm of the night. Crickets began their gentle symphony, and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures echoed across the plains. Inside the den, Sarabi curled protectively around Simba, her steady heartbeat a lullaby that soothed him into sleep. Mufasa lay close, his watchful eyes reflecting the soft glow of the stars above. Outside, Rafiki sat upon a nearby rock, his gaze lifted to the sky. He traced the constellations with his eyes, finding the familiar shapes of the great kings of the past. He smiled softly, knowing that they, too, were watching over the young cub. The wind carried a whisper through the trees, a promise of adventures yet to come. And so, under the watchful eyes of the stars, Simba slept peacefully, unaware of the great destiny that awaited him. The Pride Lands awakened with the gentle touch of dawn. A soft golden light spread across the savanna, casting long shadows over the rolling grasslands. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of morning dew. Birds flitted between the branches of acacia trees, greeting the new day with delicate songs, while distant herds of wildebeest began their slow, steady migration across the plains. Inside the royal den of Pride Rock, a small lion cub stirred. Simba stretched his tiny limbs, his golden fur catching the first rays of sunlight that streamed through the entrance. He yawned widely, his pink tongue curling as he blinked sleepily. His mother, Sarabi, lay beside him, her warmth still comforting even as he wriggled free from her embrace. Outside, standing at the very edge of Pride Rock, King Mufasa watched over his kingdom. His powerful frame was still in the cool morning air, his mane rustling slightly in the wind. He was a ruler of wisdom and strength, but at this moment he was simply a father waiting for his son. Simba, his tiny paws still clumsy but eager, bounded toward his father, his excitement spilling over in every movement. "Dad, Dad, you said you were going to show me the kingdom today," he chirped, his voice high with youthful enthusiasm. Mufasa turned to his son, his deep amber eyes filled with patience and love. "Ah, you're awake, my son," he said with a soft chuckle. He lowered his gray head so that his muzzle nearly touched Simba's. "Come, walk with me." Simba's tail twitched with excitement as he followed his father, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone as they descended from Pride Rock. The land stretched out before them, vast and full of life. Birds soared overhead, and the rustling of unseen creatures moving through the grass whispered in the morning silence. As they walked, Mufasa's deep voice carried through the air. "Everything the light touches is our kingdom," he said, gesturing with a sweep of his paw. "One day, Simba, all of this will be yours." Simba's eyes widened as he took in the sight of the endless plains, the shimmering rivers, the distant mountains that seemed to kiss the sky. "Wow," he breathed. "Everything?" Mufasa nodded. "Yes. But being king is more than just having power. A true king must understand the balance of life. He must respect every creature, from the crawling ant to the leaping antelope." Simba tilted his head, trying to absorb his father's words. "But don't we eat the antelope?" he asked curiously. Mufasa smiled, amused by his son's innocence. "Yes, Simba, we do. But let me show you something." They reached the edge of a hill, where the land sloped gently downward. Below, a herd of antelope grazed peacefully, their ears flicking as they sensed the lion's presence but did not flee. "When we die, our bodies become the grass," Mufasa explained. "And the antelope eat the grass. And so, we are all connected in the great circle of life." Simba frowned slightly, trying to understand. He was still young, still seeing the world in simple, playful ways. But his father's words held weight, and something about them settled deep within him. As they continued their walk, Mufasa led Simba to a high rock that overlooked the plains. He sat down, his massive form relaxed yet regal. Simba scrambled up beside him, his tiny paws gripping the warm stone. Mufasa looked up at the vast sky, where wisps of clouds drifted lazily. "Simba, a king's time as ruler rises and falls like the sun. One day, my time will come to an end, and you will rise as the new king." Simba looked up at his father, his young mind struggling to grasp the idea of his father not always being there. "But that won't happen for a long, long time, right?" Mufasa's gaze softened. "Yes, for a long time," he assured. "But you must always remember what I am teaching you. The land is not just ours. We share it with all who live here, and as king, your duty is to protect them, to care for them, just as I do." Simba puffed out his small chest, trying to look as strong as his father. "I'll be a great king," he declared. "Brave, strong, and no one will tell me what to do." Mufasa chuckled, his deep laughter rolling through the air like distant thunder. "Oh, Simba," he said with amusement. "Being king is not about being able to do whatever you want." Simba blinked, confused. "It's not?" Mufasa shook his head. "No, my son. It is about understanding responsibility. You must always think of others before yourself." Simba's ears drooped slightly. Responsibility was not as exciting as he had imagined. He had thought being king meant being able to do anything, to go anywhere, to be fearless and free. Mufasa nudged his son gently. "You have a good heart, Simba. And in time, you will understand." Just then, the wind shifted, carrying a familiar scent. Mufasa's expression changed, his senses sharpening. "Come," he said, rising to his feet. "There is something else I must show you." Simba followed eagerly as they made their way toward the north, where the land began to darken. The grass thinned, the trees grew sparse, and soon they stood at the edge of a vast, shadowy wasteland. The ground here was cracked and dry, the air thick with an eerie silence. Simba wrinkled his nose. "What is this place?" Mufasa's voice was firm. "That, Simba, is the elephant graveyard. It is beyond our borders, and you must never go there." Simba's curiosity flared. "Why not?" Mufasa's gaze remained steady. "It is a dangerous place, ruled by creatures who do not follow the laws of the Pride Lands." Simba frowned but nodded, sensing the seriousness in his father's voice. Even as his young mind brimmed with questions, he knew better than to push further. As they turned back toward the golden plains, the warmth of the sun returned to them, washing away the chill of the shadowed land behind them. Mufasa led Simba to a great acacia tree, where they rested beneath its wide branches. The cub curled up beside his father, his small body fitting snugly against the king's massive frame. For a moment, all was quiet. The wind whispered through the leaves, the distant calls of birds filling the air. Simba's eyes grew heavy, his body warm and safe beside his father's. He yawned, his voice soft and sleepy. "Dad, will you always be here?" Mufasa looked down at his son, his expression tender. "Look up, Simba," he said, tilting his head toward the sky. Simba blinked and gazed at the brilliant blue expanse. "The great kings of the past looked down on us from those stars," Mufasa said. "Whenever you feel alone, just remember that they are always with you." Simba's small eyes traced the sky, his young mind trying to picture the ancient kings watching over him. He smiled, reassured by his father's words. Mufasa leaned down, pressing his nose gently against Simba's head. "And so will I." With those words, Simba let his eyes close, the steady rise and fall of his father's breath lulling him into sleep. The savannah stretched before them, bathed in golden light, while above, the sky remained vast and endless, holding the silent watch of the great kings before them. And so, under the warmth of the midday sun, the young cub slept, dreaming of the day when he too would take his place among the stars. The sun hung high in the sky, drenching the Pride Lands in warm, golden light. The tall grass swayed gently in the afternoon breeze, and the sounds of distant herds filled the air. It was a peaceful day, too peaceful for a restless young cub like Simba. After his morning lesson with Mufasa, Simba's mind was buzzing with thoughts. The circle of life, responsibility, the kingdom. His father had said so many things, but one thing stood out above all. The elephant graveyard. He hadn't stopped thinking about it since Mufasa had pointed it out. A forbidden place, shrouded in mystery, beyond the borders of their land. Why was it so dangerous? What could possibly be there? Simba paced back and forth on a sun-warmed rock near the waterhole, his tail flicking with impatience. He needed to know more. And he knew exactly who to bring along. Spotting a familiar figure near the water's edge, Simba grinned. "Nala," he called. The young lioness, about the same age as Simba, looked up from where she was swatting at a beetle. "What?" she asked, tilting her head. Simba trotted over, his eyes gleaming with mischief. "I have an idea." Nala's ears perked up. "What kind of idea?" she asked cautiously. Simba glanced around, making sure no adults were watching. "An adventure," he whispered. Nala's curiosity was piqued, but she knew Simba well enough to be suspicious. "Where are we going?" Simba puffed out his chest. "To the elephant graveyard," he declared. Nala's eyes widened. "But Simba, your dad said..." "He said it was dangerous," Simba interrupted, "but that just means it has to be really cool." "Come on, don't you want to see what's out there?" Nala hesitated. She wasn't sure this was a good idea, but she also didn't want to back down. Adventures with Simba were always exciting. "Okay," she said finally, "but how are we going to get past Zazu?" The two cubs turned their heads toward a large rock where Zazu, the king's majordomo, was preening his feathers. The hornbill had been assigned to watch over them, a duty he took very seriously. Simba smirked. "Leave that to me." With a flick of his tail, he bounded towards Zazu. "Hey, Zazu," he called cheerfully. The bird glanced up. "Ah, young prince. What mischief are you up to today?" Simba put on his most innocent face. "Oh, nothing. Nala and I just want to go down to the waterhole to play." "Can we?" Zazu narrowed his eyes. "As long as you stay where I can see you." Simba nodded quickly. "Of course." As the two cubs made their way toward the waterhole, Zazu followed, keeping a watchful eye on them. But Simba had a plan. He nudged Nala and whispered, "When I say go, we run." Nala grinned. She liked this part. Simba suddenly shouted, "Go!" and both cubs sprinted in opposite directions, kicking up dust as they dashed through the grass. "Wait! No, no, no!" Zazu squawked, flapping his wings frantically. "Simba, Nala, come back this instant." But the cubs were already gone, giggling as they wove through the tall grass, their paws barely touching the ground. They knew Zazu would struggle to keep up. By the time the bird caught sight of them again, they had reached the far end of the savannah, where the land began to darken. The golden grass gave way to dry, cracked earth, and a strange, eerie silence filled the air. Zazu finally caught up, panting as he landed in front of them. "Young prince, I must insist." But before he could finish, a deep shadow passed over them. The cubs and Zazu looked up to see a group of large, dark figures watching them from the edge of the graveyard. Hyenas. There were 3 of them, each with scruffy fur and eyes that gleamed with wicked amusement. The largest, a female with sharp features and a ragged ear, took a slow step forward. Well, she drawled, her voice low and teasing. "What do we have here?" Simba gulped, but he quickly puffed out his chest. "I'm Simba, future king of the Pride Lands," he declared. The hyenas exchanged glances before bursting into laughter. Their cackling filled the air, bouncing off the dry rocks. "Oh, did you hear that, Shensi?" one of them said between laughs. "I sure did, Bonsai," the leader replied, grinning. "The future king has come to visit." Simba frowned. He didn't like being laughed at. "We're not afraid of you," he said defiantly. "Oh, is that so?" Shensi purred, stepping closer. "Then maybe you won't mind if we play a little?" Before Simba or Nala could react, the hyenas lunged. "Run!" Zazu squawked, flapping his wings wildly as the cubs turned and bolted. The dry ground cracked beneath their paws as they raced back toward the Pride Lands, the hyenas in close pursuit. The cubs weaved through boulders and leapt over dried-out logs, their hearts pounding. But the hyenas were faster. One snapped its jaws just inches from Nala's tail. Another swiped at Simba, barely missing. Panic surged through the young prince as he realized they weren't going to make it. Then, the ground trembled. A deep, earth-shaking roar split the air, so powerful that even the hyenas skidded to a halt. From the shadows, Mufasa emerged. His golden mane burned like fire in the sun, and his amber eyes blazed with fury. The hyenas froze. "Get away from my son," Mufasa growled. For a moment, there was silence. Then, in a blur of movement, Mufasa lunged. The hyenas yelped and scattered, scrambling over each other to escape. Shensi, Bonsai, and the third hyena, Ed, fled back into the graveyard, their laughter replaced by terrified whimpers. Simba panted, his legs trembling. He had never seen his father like that before. Mufasa turned to him, his expression unreadable. "Come," he said simply. The walk back to Pride Rock was silent. Simba and Nala exchanged nervous glances, knowing they were in trouble. Even Zazu, though relieved, kept quiet. When they reached the base of Pride Rock, Mufasa finally stopped. "Simba," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you deliberately disobeyed me." Simba lowered his head. I was just trying to be brave." Mufasa sighed, his expression softening. "Being brave doesn't mean looking for trouble. A true king knows when to be cautious." Simba swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Dad." Mufasa placed a paw on his son's back. "Come with me." As the sun set, father and son walked together, disappearing into the golden light. The lesson was not yet over. Simba had taken his first real step toward understanding what it meant to be king. But he still had much to learn. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky streaked with deep purples and oranges. A warm breeze carried the distant sounds of the savannah, the distant trumpeting of elephants, the chatter of birds settling in for the night. But near Pride Rock, all was silent. Simba followed his father through the tall grass, his small paws pressing into the soft earth. His heart still pounded from the terrifying chase in the elephant graveyard. He had never seen Mufasa so angry before, and shame burned in his chest. They reached a quiet clearing where the stars had begun to flicker to life in the darkening sky. Mufasa stopped and sat down, his massive form blending into the golden glow of the land. He didn't speak at first, letting the night wrap around them like a soft blanket. Simba hesitated before settling beside him. He kept his eyes down, ears flicking uncertainly. "Dad, are you mad at me?" he asked softly. Mufasa sighed, but it wasn't an angry sigh. It was deeper, heavier, like the weight of something unseen pressing on his shoulders. "I'm disappointed, Simba," he admitted. The words stung worse than any scolding. Mufasa turned his gaze toward his son, his expression unreadable. "You deliberately disobeyed me. You put yourself, Nala, and even Zazu in danger." Simba shrank under his father's gaze. "I just wanted to be brave, like you." Mufasa's expression softened. "Simba, being brave doesn't mean looking for danger. It means knowing when to stand your ground and when to walk away." Simba frowned. "But I thought kings weren't afraid of anything." Mufasa gave a small chuckle, but there was something sad in it. "Even kings get scared, my son." Simba looked up at him in disbelief. "You do?" Mufasa nodded. "Of course. Today, when I saw you and Nala in danger, I was very afraid." He exhaled slowly, gazing at the stars. "A king must be strong, yes, but he must also be wise. He must think of his people before himself. That is what makes a true leader." Simba let the words sink in. He had always thought being king meant having power, making decisions, and never feeling scared. But his father had just admitted he was afraid of losing him. Mufasa stood up and gestured to the sky. "Come, Simba. Let me show you something." The cub followed his father's gaze upward. The sky had darkened completely now, and the stars shimmered above them like tiny diamonds. "Look at the stars," Mufasa said. "The great kings of the past looked down on us from those stars." Simba's ears perked. "Really?" Mufasa nodded. "Yes. They are always watching, always guiding us. And when you feel lost or alone, just remember, they are there. And so am I." Simba looked up at the vast sky, his eyes tracing the constellations. He tried to imagine the kings of old, wise and strong, watching over him. He wanted to believe they would guide him when he needed them. A comfortable silence settled between them. Mufasa lay down on the cool grass, and Simba curled up beside him, his small frame nestled against his father's warm fur. For the first time that day, he felt safe. As his eyes grew heavy, he whispered, "Do you think I'll be a good king someday, Dad?" Mufasa smiled, resting his chin gently on Simba's head. "I know you will be." The wind whispered through the grass, carrying their voices into the night. And above them, the stars continued their silent watch, holding the promise of the future. The golden light of dawn bathed the pride lands in warmth, stretching long shadows across the savannah. The air was fresh with the scent of dewdrops clinging to the grass, and the distant roars of awakening beasts echoed across the land. High on Pride Rock, Simba stretched and yawned, his young body still curled in the spot where he had fallen asleep the night before, nestled against his father's warmth. As he blinked the sleep from his eyes, he realized Mufasa was already gone. His father must have woken early for his duties as king. Simba sighed. He wanted to be just like him, but being a king seemed exhausting. His ears perked at the sound of approaching footsteps. Turning his head, he saw his Uncle Scar emerge from the shadows of a nearby ledge, his green eyes gleaming with something unreadable. Good morning, Simba, Scar purred, his voice smooth as ever. Simba stretched again and sat up, his tail flicking. Morning, Uncle Scar, he said, always eager to impress the older lion. Scar circled him lazily, his sharp claws tapping against the rock. I hear you had quite the little adventure yesterday, he mused. The elephant graveyard, was it? Simba's ears drooped. He didn't like thinking about that. Yeah, but I wasn't supposed to go there, he admitted. Dad was really mad. Scar let out a low chuckle. Oh, Simba, you are so much like your father. Always so eager. His tone was playful, but something about it made Simba shift uncomfortably. You know, Scar continued, sitting down beside him, I have something special to show you. A secret, just for you. Simba's curiosity flared to life. A secret? Scar leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Yes. Something only the bravest lions get to see. Simba straightened, eager to prove himself. Really? What is it? Scar smirked. A surprise. But first, you must promise me something. Simba's ears flicked. What? You mustn't tell your father. This is a royal secret. Scar's voice was silky, almost hypnotic. Can you do that for me, dear boy? Simba hesitated. He had learned yesterday what happened when he didn't listen to his father. But Scar was his uncle. Surely he wouldn't lead him into trouble, would he? He swallowed and nodded. I promise. Scar's grin widened. Excellent. He stood and motioned for Simba to follow. The young cub padded eagerly behind him as Scar led him down the rocky slope and out onto the open plains. The journey was long, and the land changed as they walked. Lush grasslands gave way to cracked earth and jagged cliffs. Simba had never been this far before. Finally, they arrived at a gorge. It was wide and deep, with steep walls of stone enclosing a dry riverbed below. The air smelled of dust and distant herds. Scar led him to the edge, then turned to Simba, his gaze unreadable. Wait here, my boy. Your surprise is just around the corner. Simba's tail swished with excitement. Really? What is it? Scar chuckled, his voice low and knowing. Patience, my dear nephew. All good things come to those who wait. With that, Scar turned and padded away, vanishing over a rise in the land. Simba sat down, scanning the gorge. The sun was high now, and the heat made the rocks shimmer. He frowned. The place was oddly quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, no distant calls of animals. Then, the ground beneath him trembled. At first, it was faint, a slight vibration, like a whisper in the earth. But then it grew stronger. The distant rumble turned into a thunderous roar. Simba's ears perked, his eyes widening as he turned toward the far end of the gorge. A massive herd of wildebeests was charging straight toward him. His heart leapt into his throat. Dust billowed around them, their hooves striking the ground like rolling thunder. They were coming fast. Too fast. Panic surged through him. Uncle Scar, he shouted, scrambling to his feet. Uncle Scar, help! But there was no answer. The stampede was almost upon him now. Simba ran, his paws barely touching the ground as he scrambled toward the nearest ledge. His claws scraped against the rock as he tried to climb, but the stone was too smooth. He slipped. The thunderous sound of the wildebeest filled his ears, drowning out everything else. Dust stung his eyes. His tiny body trembled with fear. Then, through the chaos, he heard a voice. "Simba!" His heart soared with relief. It was his father. Mufasa appeared at the top of the gorge, his powerful frame silhouetted against the blinding sun. Without hesitation, he leapt down into the stampede, his paws striking the ground with the force of a warrior. "Hold on, Simba!" The young cub clung to the rock face as Mufasa charged through the stampede, dodging and weaving through the charging wildebeests. Dust clouded everything, but Mufasa never faltered. With a mighty leap, he grabbed Simba by the scruff of his neck and pulled him up. For a brief moment, Simba felt safe. But they weren't out yet. Mufasa carried Simba in his mouth, leaping onto a nearby rock before flinging him to safety on a ledge. Simba tumbled but quickly scrambled up, turning just in time to see his father struggling. Mufasa had tried to climb, but the force of the stampede had knocked him back down. He was at the mercy of the wildebeests, his claws scraping desperately against the rocky wall. Simba's eyes widened in terror. "Dad!" Mufasa fought to climb, using every ounce of strength he had. He reached for the edge of the ledge, his claws gripping tightly. Then, a shadow appeared above him. Scar. Simba felt a rush of relief. Scar would help. He had to. Mufasa met his brother's eyes. "Scar, help me." Scar looked down at him. His expression was unreadable at first, then slowly shifted into something cruel. A wicked smirk curled his lips. "Long live the king." Before Simba could process what was happening, Scar reached out and let go. Simba watched in horror as his father's paws slipped from the ledge. Time seemed to slow. Mufasa's eyes locked onto his son's for a fraction of a second before he plummeted into the dust and chaos below. The roar of the stampede drowned out everything. Simba's breath caught in his throat. His tiny body shook. Then, as the dust settled, there was silence. Mufasa was gone. The dust from the stampede had barely begun to settle, yet for Simba, the world had already changed forever. His small body trembled as he crept forward, his wide eyes searching through the haze. His heart pounded so loudly in his chest that he could barely hear the whisper of the wind. And then he saw him. At the base of the gorge, sprawled motionless among the scattered rocks and trampled earth, lay Mufasa. Simba's breath hitched. His paws felt like they had turned to stone, refusing to move. But he had to go to him. Slowly, unsteadily, he climbed down the steep slope, his tiny claws struggling for grip. The closer he got, the heavier the silence became. No birds chirped. No wind howled. Even the ground beneath him felt lifeless. "Dad?" Simba's voice was barely above a whisper as he reached his father's side. He nudged Mufasa's massive shoulder with his paw. "Dad?" No answer. His father's golden mane was dusted with dirt, his once strong limbs lying still, unmoving. His chest didn't rise. His deep, rumbling breath was gone. Simba nudged him again, harder this time. "Dad, wake up," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "We have to go home." Still nothing. A lump rose in Simba's throat. His vision blurred as hot tears welled up in his eyes. He pressed himself against his father's side, trying to find warmth, trying to find the comfort he had always known. But there was nothing. The weight of realization pressed down on him, suffocating. His father, his hero, was gone. "Help!" Simba's voice rang out, desperate, but the gorge remained empty. "Somebody, anybody, help!" No one answered. Then, from the shadows above, a slow, deliberate set of footsteps approached. Scar. The dark lion stepped into view, his green eyes gleaming with something unreadable as he descended towards Simba. The cub blinked through his tears, looking up at his uncle as if he were a lifeline. "Uncle Scar," Simba sobbed. There was a stampede. I tried to wake him up, but he won't move." Scar gazed down at the lifeless form of his brother, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, with a deep sigh, he lowered his head, his voice filled with practiced sorrow. "Simba," he said softly, "what have you done?" Simba's heart clenched. I didn't mean to," he stammered. It was an accident." Scar circled him slowly, his voice laced with faint sympathy. Of course, he murmured. "No one means for these things to happen. But the truth remains, Simba." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The king is dead." The words cut through Simba like a blade. He felt sick. Scar crouched beside him, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And if it weren't for you, he'd still be alive." Simba's ears flattened. His stomach twisted into knots. "No," he whimpered. "It wasn't my fault." Scar sighed dramatically. "Oh, Simba," he murmured, shaking his head. "The others will never understand. If they find out." He trailed off, watching the terror seep into Simba's young face. Simba's mind raced. What would his mother say? What would the pride do? Scar leaned closer. "Run away, Simba," he whispered, his breath warm against the cub's ear. "Run away and never return." Simba hesitated. His paws trembled against the dirt. He didn't want to leave. Pride Rock was his home. His mother was there. But Scar's words dug into his heart like thorns. He killed his father. He could never go back. Scar straightened and gave him one last look. "Go," he commanded. "Now." Simba didn't wait. He turned and ran. He ran as fast as his tiny legs could carry him, away from the gorge, away from his father's lifeless body, away from everything he had ever known. His vision blurred with tears, the wind howling in his ears as he sprinted across the savannah. Behind him, Scar watched until the cub was nothing more than a golden speck in the distance. Then, with a slow, satisfied smirk, he turned back toward the gorge. From the shadows, a trio of hyenas emerged. "You know what to do," Scar said simply. The hyenas cackled, their sharp teeth glinting in the fading light. "Consider it done," Shensi purred. They took off after the fleeing cub, their laughter echoing in the air. underscore 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 underscore. Simba ran until his legs burned, until his breath came in ragged gasps. The once familiar land blurred around him, turning from golden plains to rocky wastelands. The heat of the sun beat down on him, his small body struggling against exhaustion. But still, he ran. The sound of laughter sent a chill up his spine. He risked a glance behind him and saw them, 3 dark figures gaining on him. "Where do you think you're going, little prince?" Bonsai sneered. Simba yelped and pushed himself harder, his paws stumbling over loose stones. Scar said to finish him off. Ed giggled wildly. Simba spotted a narrow ravine ahead. Without thinking, he leapt, his tiny frame barely making it across. He landed roughly, rolling in the dust. The hyenas skidded to a stop at the edge. "He's just a cub," Shensi scoffed. "He's as good as dead out there." Bonsai snorted. "Yeah, the desert will take care of him." They turned back, laughing as they disappeared into the distance. Simba lay there, panting, his body aching. The sun blazed overhead, the heat shimmering off the cracked earth. He had nowhere to go. No home. No family. For the first time in his life, he was truly alone. And so, as the sun set on the pride lands, Simba wandered into the wastelands, each step carrying him further from the only world he had ever known. The dust from the stampede had barely begun to settle, yet for Simba, the world had already changed forever. His small body trembled as he crept forward, his wide eyes searching through the haze. His heart pounded so loudly in his chest that he could barely hear the whisper of the wind. And then, he saw him. At the base of the gorge, sprawled motionless among the scattered rocks and trampled earth, lay Mufasa. Simba's breath hitched. His paws felt like they had turned to stone, refusing to move. But he had to go to him. Slowly, unsteadily, he climbed down the steep slope, his tiny claws struggling for grip. The closer he got, the heavier the silence became. No birds chirped. No wind howled. Even the ground beneath him felt lifeless. "Dad?" Simba's voice was barely above a whisper as he reached his father's side. He nudged Mufasa's massive shoulder with his paw. "Dad?" No answer. His father's golden mane was dusted with dirt, his once strong limbs lying still, unmoving. His chest didn't rise. His deep, rumbling breath was gone. Simba nudged him again, harder this time. "Dad, wake up," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "We have to go home." Still nothing. A lump rose in Simba's throat. His vision blurred as hot tears welled up in his eyes. He pressed himself against his father's side, trying to find warmth, trying to find the comfort he had always known. But there was nothing. The weight of realization pressed down on him, suffocating. His father, his hero, was gone. "Help!" Simba's voice rang out, desperate, but the gorge remained empty. "Somebody, anybody, help!" No one answered. Then, from the shadows above, a slow, deliberate set of footsteps approached. Scar. The dark lion stepped into view, his green eyes gleaming with something unreadable as he descended towards Simba. The cub blinked through his tears, looking up at his uncle as if he were a lifeline. "Uncle Scar," Simba sobbed. "There was a stampede. I tried to wake him up, but he won't move." Scar gazed down at the lifeless form of his brother, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, with a deep sigh, he lowered his head, his voice filled with practiced sorrow. "Simba," he said softly, "what have you done?" Simba's heart clenched. I didn't mean to," he stammered. It was an accident." Scar circled him slowly, his voice laced with faint sympathy. Of course, he murmured. "No one means for these things to happen. But the truth remains, Simba." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "The king is dead." The words cut through Simba like a blade. He felt sick. Scar crouched beside him, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And if it weren't for you, he'd still be alive." Simba's ears flattened. His stomach twisted into knots. "No," he whimpered. "It wasn't my fault." Scar sighed dramatically. "Oh, Simba," he murmured, shaking his head. "The others will never understand. If they find out." He trailed off, watching the terror seep into Simba's young face. Simba's mind raced. What would his mother say? What would the pride do? Scar leaned closer. "Run away, Simba," he whispered, his breath warm against the cub's ear. "Run away and never return." Simba hesitated. His paws trembled against the dirt. He didn't want to leave. Pride Rock was his home. His mother was there. But Scar's words dug into his heart like thorns. He killed his father. He could never go back. Scar straightened and gave him one last look. "Go," he commanded. "Now." Simba didn't wait. He turned and ran. He ran as fast as his tiny legs could carry him, away from the gorge, away from his father's lifeless body, away from everything he had ever known. His vision blurred with tears, the wind howling in his ears as he sprinted across the savannah. Behind him, Scar watched until the cub was nothing more than a golden speck in the distance. Then, with a slow, satisfied smirk, he turned back toward the gorge. From the shadows, a trio of hyenas emerged. "You know what to do," Scar said simply. The hyenas cackled, their sharp teeth glinting in the fading light. "Consider it done," Shensi purred. They took off after the fleeing cub, their laughter echoing in the air. The jungle had become Simba's sanctuary, a place where time flowed lazily, where worries were left behind like footprints in the sand. But one fateful day, everything changed. It started with a voice, soft, yet unmistakable. "Simba?" Simba turned sharply. There, standing before him, was a lioness. But not just any lioness. Nala. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, in a flash, they collided, wrestling, laughing, rolling through the jungle floor like they were cubs again. But when the laughter died down, reality settled in. "You're alive," Nala breathed. Simba blinked, his stomach twisting. "Of course I am. What are you doing here?" Nala's expression turned serious. "Simba, you have to come back." The words hit him like a thunderclap. "Back?" His voice wavered. "Pride Rock is dying," she explained. "Scar has ruined everything. The land is dry. There's no food, no water. Simba, your mother, everyone, they're suffering." Simba's heart clenched. He could almost see it. The once golden plains turned barren, the sky heavy with smoke, the land cracked and lifeless. But he shook his head. "I can't go back, Nala." Her eyes widened. "Can't? I'm not who I used to be," he muttered, turning away. "I left that life behind." Nala stared at him. "Simba, Scar let us believe you were dead. He took over because you weren't there." She took a step forward. "The kingdom needs you." Simba flinched. His paws dug into the earth. "You don't understand," he whispered. "It was my fault. My father." He squeezed his eyes shut. "I can't go back." Silence. Then Nala's voice softened. "Simba, your father's death wasn't your fault. Scar lied to you." Simba's breath hitched. He wanted to believe her. He really did. But the word Scar had planted in his heart so long ago still lingered like a shadow. That night, he wandered away from the others, his thoughts a storm inside him. The jungle's peace felt distant. He found himself staring at the stars. Then, a gentle breeze stirred the trees. And with it, a voice. "Simba." Simba's breath caught. His ears perked up. It was deep. Familiar. Impossible. "Father," he whispered. The wind carried the voice again. "Remember who you are." And then, the clouds above shifted, parting just enough to reveal a shape among the stars, a mighty lion, his golden mane shimmering in the heavens. "Mufasa, you are my son," the voice rumbled, "and the one true king." Simba's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm not ready." "You are more than what you have become," Mufasa said. "You must take your place in the circle of life." Simba swallowed, his heart pounding. "Remember who you are." And just like that, the vision faded, leaving only the stars twinkling above. Simba stood there for a long time, his father's words echoing in his soul. Then he turned. It was time to go home. Underscore 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 underscore. The journey back to Pride Rock was different. There was no fear in Simba's steps, no doubt in his heart. The lion who had run away was gone. In his place was someone stronger. When he reached Pride Rock, what he saw nearly took his breath away. The land was lifeless. The sky hung dark and heavy with smoke. Bones littered the ground. Hyenas prowled everywhere. And at the peak of Pride Rock stood Scar, his once sleek mane unkempt, his eyes sharp and cruel. Simba stepped forward. Scar turned and froze. For a moment, all was silent. Then, Scar sneered. "Ah, the ghost returns. Gasps rippled through the pride. The lionesses stared in shock. Sarabi, Simba's mother, lifted her head, her tired eyes wide with disbelief. "Simba," she whispered. Simba's chest tightened, but he held his ground. "It's over, Scar." Scar chuckled, slow and mocking. "You're serious? Look around you, nephew. You lost the moment you ran away." Simba took another step forward. "This isn't your kingdom. It's time for you to step down." Scar's smirk twitched. "Or what?" Simba's eyes burned. "Or fight me." The hyenas growled, but Scar raised a paw, silencing them. His gaze darkened. "If it's a fight you want, dear boy," he murmured, stepping closer, "then let's finish what we started." The storm broke. They clashed with a fury that sent echoes across the savannah. Scar was cunning, but Simba was strong. Each blow carried the weight of the past, of the truth, of everything Simba had run from. Then, Scar made a mistake. In the chaos, he whispered something he shouldn't have. "It was me," he hissed. "I killed Mufasa." Simba froze. His blood turned to fire. With a roar that shook the heavens, he struck Scar down. The fallen king scrambled backward, eyes wide with fear. "Simba, nephew, have mercy." Simba loomed over him. "Run," he growled, his voice steady. "Run away and never return." Scar hesitated, then bolted. But the hyenas had heard everything. And Scar, who had used them, betrayed them, feared them, found no mercy among them. As the storm clouds parted, the first rays of dawn touched the land. Simba turned, facing the pride. They watched him in silence, hope flickering in their tired eyes. Simba took a deep breath, then stepped forward. And, for the first time in his life, he roared. It was deep, strong, a declaration to the world. The lionesses joined in, their voices rising to the heavens. And as the rain began to fall, washing away the scars of the past, the land breathed again. Simba had come home, and the circle of life continued. That's the story of the Legend of Simba. Hopefully this story can help you sleep. Good night.